Okay, hello once again, everybody out there in wrestling land. My name is Bobby Munson, and I want to welcome you to Ring Respect Radio, and I am here with my co-host, the man with the angelic voice. If you don't know him already, you better know him soon. He is Papa Smokes. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Munson, and how are all you wrestling people doing out there?
Hopefully everybody's doing good, staying healthy. Speaking of staying healthy, Papa Smokes, we were going to actually record this earlier in the week. I had to back off doing that, lost my voice. I actually kind of thought I might be coming down with the coronavirus, the COVID-19. It was a little bit of a scare. Got my test. I am COVID-free, so just so everybody knows, now we are pushing forth with this episode here today, and it's a very special episode, Papa Smokes. Bit of something that's been in the works for a little bit now here. We've been doing this thing here on the Video Bros Network, this Ring Respect, for quite some time now. And just recently, we had Mike, the ref from Alberta, reach out to us, and he wanted to know if we wanted to also be included as part of Backbreaker Media, which takes place in Alberta. So this might be the very first time that some of the fans are getting first listen to Ring Respect Radio here on the Video Bros Network or on Backbreaker Media. So definitely, check us out here. You can always subscribe to us here on YouTube, but also go ahead, check out Backbreaker Media's channels. They are available on YouTube, Twitch, I believe on other various areas as well, too. I'm going to have to get a little bit more familiar with Papa Smokes, but I mean, let's welcome all our Alberta fans and the team behind Backbreaker Media having us on board.
Yeah, isn't this great? This is an exciting time and kind of a new era for our podcast, getting out to some different ears and some more ears, and being included amongst the Backbreaker Media, which has some great content. So thanks to Mike and the boys out in Alberta, and to all our new listeners, hello, and have a good time listening to us.
Definitely. So very excited. And we thought maybe for a very first episode that is going to be taking place on the Backbreaker Media channels, that we would dig a little deeper into the depths of professional wrestling right here in the Prairie provinces. I mean, you and I have our own stories as well, too, about how we got involved in the industry, Papa Smokes, and that's how I think we're going to end the show here today, is we're going to talk about our own journeys and how we came to know each other, how, the Video Bros Network and Ring Respect Radio came to be as it is today. But in the meantime, I posed the question earlier to the two of us to dig a little bit deeper into the history of professional wrestling here in Saskatchewan, as well as the Prairie provinces, Alberta. We can include both BC and Manitoba in there as well, too. There's a very, very rich history of professional wrestling within the Prairie provinces, and we just want all the listeners out there to have an opportunity to find out just the wealth and the depth of professional wrestling here in the Prairies. So, let's get it kicked off. Papa Smokes, what can you bring to the table for the history here?
Well, of course, a big giant topic, Munson. Lots to think about, lots to read about, and talk about on this podcast. The history of professional wrestling in the Canadian prairies goes back to the turn of the 20th century, early 1900s, and Saskatchewan wasn't a particular hotbed for homegrown promotions and such like that, but a lot of the history that you'll read about the Canadian prairies centers around Calgary and the Stampede era, once Stu and Helen Hart came and started their empire out of Calgary, and then of course Winnipeg's known as a great blue-collar wrestling city, very thriving scene, both independent and a couple of major federations used to run in Winnipeg too, so we'll have lots to talk about.
For sure. And you know what? Let's kick it off right away. Like you mentioned Stu Hart and the Stampede Wrestling, of course, and a lot of people, they know of the Hart family. They're very familiar with it. Of course, Brett Owen, who I'm sure we'll talk about in depth on the show here today. But let's talk a little bit about Stu Hart himself. I mean, probably one of the biggest legends coming out of the Prairie provinces in so many ways for what he did for professional wrestling. I mean, we're talking about a guy born here, right in Saskatoon in our own backyard initially before moving out to Calgary. And, what can we tell the fans a little bit more about Stu Hart himself as a professional wrestler and in his life?
Well, just as most professionals were at the time in the 50s, when Stu was coming up big as a wrestler, late 40s, early 50s. He was already a shooter. He was already well versed in submission grappling and other forms of judo and jiu-jitsu and that kind of thing. He was already a legit tough guy in the business, as most were at that time. But Stu was like a lot of people with big dreams up here in Canada. If you want to reach the top of your profession or your art, and want to make the big money, you got to go down south to the States. So Stu was a big wrestler in New York City and the New England Northeast kind of area there, and he was big for Vince McMahon Sr. and a bunch of other promotions throughout Jersey and Maine, and like I say, the U.S. Northeast there, and he was a star in New York City. That's where he met Helen Hart. I can't remember Helen's maiden name, but she was a starlet. She was a showgirl, a dancer in New York City, someone that was also pursuing her dreams. A very beautiful woman when you look at her old pictures too. And yeah, Stu and her eventually came back to where he wanted to live up here in Canada, and that's how the whole Hart family and then therefore the Hart promotion and training dungeon and everything got started in the first place.
Definitely so, and quite a lot of famous names that came out of not only Stampede Wrestling, but out of the Hart Dungeon itself that you speak about there. 1948, I believe, was when Stampede Wrestling initially was founded and ran its first run and everything like that under Stu Hart. So he would have only been about, I believe, 33 when he came to run Stampede Wrestling out of Calgary, Alberta.
Yeah, it's not bad, from having been a performer in his presumably late teens all through his 20s, but to have enough cash and enough capital to move back home and start a thriving promotion by the time you're 33. Stu must have been doing pretty good for himself in the business.
Definitely so. And then he ended up not so much stumbling upon, but he was in a part of training and also giving us probably, in my personal opinion, and hopefully will convince some other people's opinion, he brought us the Stomper Archie Goldie, the Mongolian Stomper.
Yeah.
And
one of his...
Oh,
go on.
So sorry, I was going to say, and also what many people might not realize too is the Stomper, the 14-time Stampede North American Heavyweight Champion, a record for Stampede Professional Wrestling.
Yeah, the Stomper, Archie Goldie, was one of Hart's biggest stars, and you got to remember this guy, maybe not so well known to younger fans that watch today's stuff, but Goldie was a huge star in many promotions, not just Stampede. He has so much logged matches and tours and all that kind of stuff, and championships, as you say, in Stampede Wrestling. But Archie Goldie was a huge star throughout the South, throughout the Carolinas, Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, the southern states, Florida, all that stuff too, because I mean, look at Archie Goldie. He had the perfect look for a wrestler. Huge, muscular, it's such a mean, scary-looking face. Like, he had that wrestler look. People didn't like him as a heel, and he was extremely effective. Also a guy that was just basically dedicated to working out his whole life. A lot of the stories I've heard have been about some of his feats in the gym and such. Archie Goldie, a superstar of wrestling from the past, and Stu used him as much as he could up in Calgary, like you would a big established star like that.
And he would have been part of the the infamous first run of Stampede Wrestling, which also was the one that produced people that more modern fans might know, like Bret Hart, Davey Boy Smith, Dynamite Kid, were some of the big names that came out of the first run of Stampede Wrestling, or prior to Vince McMahon Jr. purchasing Stampede Wrestling in 1984.
Yeah, absolutely. Like many promoters have, and business owners in general, if in the first few years when you're trying to make your investment back and such, you want to use family. You want to use people close to you that you can trust as your employees. Wrestling no different than that. The Harts were blessed with such a large family and a bunch of boys and girls that wanted to get in the ring and emulate their famous father and get into the business itself. And look how that turned out. They got a number of Hall of Fame superstars out of that first run, including a few of the Harts and a couple of the sons-in-laws that were wrestlers that married some of the Hart sisters, such as Jim Neidhart and Davey Boy Smith and a few others that of note too. And yeah, they grew it from the core of the family. That's a good and smart way to do it.
Definitely so. And what a lot of people might not know, and I just mentioned that Vince McMahon Jr. purchasing Stampede Wrestling in 1984. From that deal, all that the then WWF would have picked up from that, they basically took Bret Hart, Davey Boy, Dynamite Kid was about the only guys that they took from that collection, brought them onto their show, and then actually resold Stampede Wrestling back to the Hart family in 1985.
Yeah, I think even they took more than that. But if you're talking about sort of superstar caliber guys, yeah, definitely the Bulldogs and Brett and Owen eventually. But they used a whole bunch of Stampede stars as preliminary talent, as guys who would be in the first couple matches and supporting talent, as they say. So including guys like Makam Singh became Vince Jr.'s plumber. What was his name? He was the wrestling plumber. T.L. Hopper.
Oh yes, yeah.
There was another handful of good, solid workers that he could use as preliminary talent too, and Vince got him cheap, so he took them and used them too.
Yeah, and then we mentioned that second run, and I mean that second run is where we started to see guys like the Owen Hart, Brian Pillman, Chris Benoit, for that matter, started to come out of that era of Stampede Wrestling, which ran from about 1985 to 1989.
Okay, yeah, and then of course there's been a third and fourth run of that too, where in more modern times where you've seen Natty Neidhart and T.J. Wilson and a few of those other guys too that have come up since then. Even Davey Boy Smith Jr. now is making a good name for himself in wrestling.
No, and what a great talent he is as well too. And yes, I believe that third run you talk about there, Papa Smokes, ran from about 1999 to 2008. I mean, there was a lot of great guys in there. I mean, we're talking and focusing on a lot of big names that people might recognize, but I mean, there was a lot of guys there that people don't necessarily know made an impact definitely here in the prairies. And during that 99 to 08 run, I mean, you got guys like Principal Richard Pound, who really, he made a lasting impact here in Saskatchewan, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. Not to leave out Principal Dick Pound. He did lots of shows for Stampede across Alberta and Saskatchewan as well. Never really making it to the superstar status or anything like that, but never to be forgotten in these provinces out here.
Definitely. So I believe he was once close. He was in talks to being called up or something like that, but something didn't work out. He ended up sticking around doing his thing here in the Prairie provinces. Great talent, great human being as well too, and definitely a lot of people, especially around here, should respect and remember Principal Richard Pound. So, what else you got there for us? I know you're a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the history, Papa Smokes. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that brain of yours and find out what else you got for us.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what happened, Munson. This is a real coup by Papa Smokes here. I think for the Video Bros Network here. When you suggested this topic last week, it kind of jogged my memory a little bit of thinking of wrestling history in Saskatchewan and on the prairies. It jogged my memory back to many years ago when I was a student at U of S campus here. I remember once going through the library and there was a display of old historical artifacts to do with professional wrestling. I was surprised to see this in the campus library, so I took a look in the they only had a few things of this collection on display, but I remember thinking, wow, I have to look into this sometime. This is a lot of cool stuff. Well, of course, fast forward to 2020, and I get thinking about it again. So I went up to the U of S library in Saskatoon here, and I went to the person that runs archives and special collections and asked about it. She informed me that it's called the Neil Richards Pro Wrestling Collection. Neil Richards was a Saskatchewan historian, and he has an interest in wrestling, and he's compiled this giant collection of classic Canadian wrestling memorabilia. And the library's a little different right now because of COVID, but I signed in and got to sit down in special collections and have a look at some of the boxes of this material. And it was just absolutely fascinating, Munson. You have to see this. And anyone out there listening to this, if you get the chance to go to U of S libraries and look at special collections, this collection is just absolutely fascinating. He's got stuff, most of it I would say is from the 50s to the 70s, Canadian, and there's some US stuff too. There's 160 books. There's 920 photos, some of which are kind of pin-ups out of magazines, and some of which are collecting cards, kind of like baseball or hockey cards. A bunch of these pin-ups are from the old magazine called the Police Gazette. Some of those are from 1889 up to 1913, and then there's some other ones too. There's a bunch of stuff from Montreal's La Presse magazine from the 20s to the 30s. There are pamphlets, posters, fan scrapbooks, comic books. There's a whole bunch of Stampede Wrestling programs from Regina from the 50s to the 70s. I can't even hardly go through all this stuff. I only had an hour with it on campus, but it was absolutely fascinating. I went through boxes and boxes of books, and I kind of particularly liked the trading cards the best. Many names that I knew, many that I didn't know, because a lot of this stuff's quite old, and some of these guys never really made it big into the history books so much, but he has in there full collections of Canadian Parkhurst trading cards, 1954 to 55, and then 55 to 56. He's got the full collections. Trying to think of some of the names I saw in there, some good U.S. and Canadian talent, Whipper Billy Watson, Lou Thez, Hard-Boiled Haggerty, Warren Bockwinkel, which is the father of Nick Bockwinkel. There was just absolutely endless amounts of these cards, and I really, really liked the cards. There was a bunch of books as well in there, including an extremely rare autographed copy of Lou Thez's book Hooker, which he was a hooker in the old days. You could get your hooks into someone and they tap out in the old grappling days. That's an extremely valuable wrestling artifact right there, autographed by Lou himself. That's a good one. I wonder where he got that.
That's impressive.
And then there's another good, rare old wrestling book that I've known of before. It's called The Fall Guys. It was written in 1937, and this is a really interesting book because I've only read excerpts from it, but it's a look at the professional wrestling business in America, but it also goes inside the business, beyond the wall that used to exist where fans and normal media were never allowed behind. So of course that was controversial in the wrestling world too. This book, The Fall Guys, has a copy of that there too, 1937. That's an old one.
Oh, wow.
And a whole bunch of magazines, boxing and wrestling magazines, including a bunch I've never even heard of, such as Wrestling Fury and Wrestling Then and Now, Ringside, NWA Official Wrestling. Great stuff, great pictures. I love that old journalism style in the old kayfabe wrestling magazines. Just fantastic stuff. And then, there were a few more books. There was many, many boxes of books, but a couple that jumped out at me were Modern Wrestling, Its Holds and Methods by Jack Curley, 1931. The Complete Science of Wrestling by George Hackenschmidt, 1909.
Nice.
That would be a good one.
There you go.
Wrestling to Wrastlin', Ancient Sport to American Spectacle, 1985. Such a good title. It's another one called The Magnificent Scufflers, Revealing the Great Days When America Wrestled the World by Charles Morrow Wilson in 1959. And this one looked pretty good too, called This Saturday Night, Detroit Wrestling, A Picture Book, 1965 to 1980 by Brian Bucantis. That one's from 2007, that more of a modern book. They also had some modern materials from the 90s and 2000s and such like that too, but I wanted to focus on more ancient artifacts if we were going to do a retro dive down wrestling's roots out here. So that's just a sample of some of the stuff that was in the special collections in the library. I felt very fortunate to get to view it, especially since I'm not a student or a prof there anymore, and came in as a guest. The library was very nice and accommodating to me, even though they're a little stricter about stuff during COVID, but I got to look at it and got to kind of spring my memory and my interest levels going up about that. So if you ever get the chance to see this, anyone within the sound of my voice right now, and including you, Munson, we should have a look at this because it's really, really cool stuff.
Well, you definitely caught my attention. It sounds like you found the holy grail of professional wrestling history all within our own backyard. I did not know that was even available, but now I definitely want to check this out.
Yeah. Hopefully we can have another look at it, because this was great, and it only makes me wonder what's in some of the larger universities out there. I mean, I'd like to see Calgary's university, Winnipeg's university. How about Montreal and Toronto? Like, they probably got some stuff on wrestling in their library archives or special collections too. And it boggles my mind to think if ours is this good, that there could be some really, really great gold mines out there.
Well, maybe we should make it a thing right now to all of our listeners, especially all the new listeners from Backbreaker Media in Alberta. Like, what do you guys have out there in your libraries and stuff like that? What can you uncover? Let Papa Smokes and I know in the comments page here, and reach out to us. We're definitely interested in learning more and finding out what's all out there and seeing what we can find out. I mean, this is fantastic news and just adds more depth to what we're doing here today.
Yeah, absolutely. To anyone out there listening that's a wrestling junkie and has some contact with their university special collections archives in some of these cities, give us a shout to take a look and tell us if there's any good stuff there, and we'd be more than interested and more than willing to talk about it, discuss it, and compare notes about all that stuff.
For sure. Now, I know you mentioned in there about one of the books being about, from the day, breaking down that wall that media and fans weren't allowed to be behind back in the day and stuff like that. And that kind of brings me to a little bit of, some of the guys that maybe came out of professional wrestling here in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, the Prairie provinces in particular, that maybe in some ways either weren't known as being from here or vice versa, weren't originally from here, but became about making this their mainstay in the end. I'll start with Roddy Piper is the name that comes to mind, born in Saskatoon and, worked a lot of the Canadian, Western Canada professional wrestling scene and stuff like that before becoming the Roddy Piper that everybody knows is being billed from Glasgow, Scotland there.
Yeah. It's isn't it wild that Piper was born in Saskatoon and then he ended up he became a wrestler at age 14 or something like that. He was working the circuits up in the north, up in northern Manitoba. He was working in the Paw and Thompson and Flin Flon and these little towns like that. And yeah, talk about putting in your dues. No wonder Piper made it big as a good wrestler, because he started young and he worked hard, and it just goes to show you it doesn't matter where you're from. It's what you got to put into it, and that's what Piper did. he got to flex that massive personality in wrestling, and everybody loved him for it.
And then I wanted to bring this up because I think it falls nicely into this. But I remember as a kid, Papa Smokes always hearing this rumor that the same was for the Undertaker. Is that the Undertaker was born and raised in Saskatoon and came out of here. I want to first of all squash that entire rumor that ever existed in the first place. But there was a lot of people to actually believe that Mark Calloway actually was born here in Saskatoon and went to school at, I believe, Walter Murray Collegiate in Saskatoon when he was going to school. Totally not true, but definitely something interesting.
Oh, for sure. I've heard that so many times. A lot of people, when meeting me for the first time, if they find out I'm interested in wrestling, will tell me that straight-faced as though it's true. And I just kind of have to, yeah, I've heard that one before a few times. I'm not going to start an argument about it, but you can look at Calloway's high school pictures and childhood pictures where he's living in Texas and all that. But yeah, it maintains. And I've heard people say that you've heard this rumor that the original Ultimate Warrior was killed somehow in the 80s in an accident or something like that, and that they just hired a replacement to put on the makeup. And I've heard that that replacement was from Saskatoon as well, which I don't even think there was a replacement. I mean, you can tell it's the same guy, Jim Hellwig or whatever his name is. And yeah, I've always heard that one too. The stand-in Ultimate Warrior was from Saskatoon. Don't know how this stuff gets started, but it's interesting anyway.
Kayfabe certainly was alive when these rumors got started, and it hasn't even died yet because I still hear some of these things as of today. And I mean, it boggles my mind that there's still people that are willing to believe these things, no matter how much you try to argue with them or anything like that. How much proof is in the pudding? They still believe it, but that's fine. You know, it's good to know that kayfabe can still be alive in some sense of the word.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and I laugh reading social media online. It's the cat is out of the bag to a certain extent. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, and the fans keep reminding each other of that. And yet, it really does strike me with some of these kind of clumsy angles in a few of these feds, like AEW, where the fans mark out completely and are completely angry about what the heel has done and said, and it just boggles my mind that there's a part of me that thinks the kayfabe's stronger than ever, because a lot of the fans just can't seem to see the other side of it either, and it's just one of those things I chuckle to myself about on a fairly regular basis.
It's alive and well. It's just, yeah, I think that as from the promotion side of things, you got to get a lot more creative with it and stuff like that in order for the fans to buy into what you're selling. And it works sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, the fans are a little bit smarter to the business, so you got to mix it up. You got to do something they're not expecting.
Yeah, that's absolutely right too, and that's why I think smaller feds are good to just play their cards close to their chest, kind of thing. And kayfabe or not, I still believe what makes a good angle run is when there's real life, at least apparently real life heat between the competitors. If there isn't any, then what is your match worth? Like we don't need to see we can watch an exhibition of acrobatic forms and stuff like that, but unless there's some actual heat unless you're actually thinking in your mind, these two don't like each other and really pretty much anything could happen at this time, then it takes away from the intensity of the match. So I think I think it's quite valuable still today.
I agree with you there. Now there is one more particular person and stuff I want to talk about here, Papa Smokes. But before we go to that, I was just wondering, is there any other topics or anybody else you want to bring up on this subject here?
No, not really, Munson. I kind of got carried away with this trip to the university library, and I just immersed myself in the comics and trading cards and old magazines of the day, and it really makes me want to present something better to the fans, or something more in depth that we can actually sink our teeth into. And I wish I could have taken some pictures of some of this stuff, but they don't allow that either. It's kept under lock and key and all that, and that's for good reason too. But And it really blew my mind as a wrestling historian. I couldn't believe that I'd stumbled across this, and yeah, like I say, we got to take a peek at this one of these times, and hopefully maybe bring it over to the fans a little bit better about just how excellent of material there is in this collection.
For sure. So the last bit I wanted to bring up before we start transitioning into the next portion of the show here, Papa Smokes, I wanted to mention, I said about people maybe not being born in the Western provinces, but making this their mainstay. And in particular, I had in mind Lance Storm comes to mind in a big way. Born in Ontario, but has made Calgary his residence for so long, and his Lance Storm Academy has really become one of the main staples of training in the Alberta wrestling scene for quite some time now.
Yeah, and don't we know all about Lance Storm's Academy, because in the various wrestling feds you and I have worked for, including PPW, we've booked and used as wrestlers a number of his graduates, and all those Lance Storm Academy graduates have one thing in common, and that is that they're well trained and they're perfectly trained. He doesn't let you out of there until you have at least the basics and the fundamentals of professional wrestling. Until you have a firm grip on that, you're not graduating from Lance Storm's school. So always hats off to Lance as a great trainer, and turning out all this great young talent that we have kicking around in across Canada, and some, of course, have made it big into the States and into the larger feds. But yeah, we know all about that around here. We've got some great graduates.
We sure do on a personal level, and I want fans to learn a little bit more in depth. And you know what, Papa Smokes, that brings me to the next segment of the show, that I actually had an opportunity to sit down with one of Prairie Pro Wrestling's very own superstars who graduated originally from the Lance Storm Academy and has continued his training along with the Prairie Pro Wrestling Academy as well too. But I had a great sit-down interview with our very own Tony Novak, and I'm going to take this moment right now for us to insert that interview right here so the fans can learn a little bit more about Tony Novak and his journey from the Lance Storm Academy straight up to Prairie Pro Wrestling. Check it out. All right, everybody, thank you for joining in. This is a very special edition of Ring Respect Radio. I am Bobby Munson, and I'm joined by a very special guest at this time. I am joined by Prairie Pro Wrestling alumni, Tony Novak. Tony, thank you for joining me here on Ring Respect Radio today.
Right on. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah. So I just want to do a little rundown of your career, and let's start by maybe letting our listeners know a little bit about you. What got you interested in professional wrestling, and tell us a little bit about your journey getting into it, where you started training, maybe some of the companies you've worked for as well, too.
Well, I actually kind of got into wrestling almost by accident, where I went over to my cousin's house when I was 10 years old, and he told me he bought a pay-per-view. Didn't know what the hell it was, and I checked it out, and it was a Royal Rumble. And then from there, I just started watching weekly, and I gotta tell you, man, it was like I found something I've always been looking for. Like, I love action movies, I love like concerts and stuff. I love like showmanship stuff, right? So I'm 10 years old, I check out pro wrestling. It's everything I've ever wanted. And like growing up, I was very active in sports. Like everyone in my family plays volleyball and hockey. Now I did as well, but I never got myself to a point where I was taking pride in it, So when I started watching wrestling, it was like, of course, I'm thinking to myself, oh, what if I'm a wrestler someday? And then as soon as I graduated high school, I started looking around locally, and I see high impact wrestling and stuff. But just connecting the dots, seeing that it was possible, back in my head, I've always wanted to try it. But man, I just you win accolades in hockey and volleyball, like any sport, right? But I've never been like excited about it. I've never been happy about it. I've never fantasized about being a professional hockey player, man. So just playing hockey was just like a side gig, right? Just doing it almost just for the hell of it. But with pro wrestling, it was all I ever focused on. It's all I ever watched. It's all I ever talked about. And you hear the cliche of people like, oh, I grew up with all my friends watching wrestling, and then they outgrew it, but I didn't. That's exactly what happened to me, man. Just on a lonely island, dude who wants to be a wrestler, dude who watches wrestling. And after I talked to the high impact wrestling people, when was that, like 2014 2014, that's when I was originally trying to get into it, but I don't know, just kind of fell through. Nothing ever came of it. So I actually moved to Calgary with my girlfriend Jensen, and I worked 2 jobs for a year and a half to save up to go train with Lance Storm. And that was a hell of a time. Like, not just meeting Lance Storm, but you ever, like, I had never been to, like, an independent wrestling show until after I got trained. So with you, like, you're a huge wrestling fan, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I honestly got, like, goosebumps being near a ring. Like, touching the rope, touching the canvas, right? Like, actually being right there, like, holy shit. Oh, sorry, can I say that?
Oh, yeah, of course you can. It's all good.
But yeah, like, it was just, it was surreal, man. Like, training with Lance and stuff, and then I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got shotgunned into it, where all I gotta do is be like, oh, I got trained by Lance, and then I started getting booked, and, you know, I'm very thankful for that. Thankful I was able to kind of get right into it, get thrown right in the fire, and yeah, it's been awesome.
Awesome. And then from there, how did your stuff progress from there, kind of thing, after you took the training with Lance and the team there? Where did your career take off from there? Where did you end up along that path?
Well, buddy from RCW, Squig, or Steven, he likes to scoop up Lance's guys. So the day after I graduated Lance's, I got booked for RCW. And then you got, you know, like Johnny Newbie over here with no fucking ring gear. Sorry, I keep swearing.
It's all good. This is an uncensored show. It's all good.
Beautiful. All right. So, yeah, so I had no ring gear. I get booked, and then from there, I told Squig that I was actually moving back to Saskatchewan the next day. He wanted to keep booking me, but then he put me in contact with Joe with Ringside Wrestling in Regina. So I started talking with him, and he was nice enough to bring me in, you know, get me started. You know, he gave me a shot, right? So I was actually there for about a year, and oh man, I cringe when I think about my time there, because I didn't have gear. Like I said, like I was just in a bad spot, like financially, you know, like not making excuses. I just straight up, you know, didn't do everything I could to get gear. So I was in a crappy spot where I was wearing like shitty cargo pants or cargo shorts, sorry. And that was dumb. But from there, I feel like I made all my mistakes in Ringside. When I look back at the stuff I did in Ringside, like work-wise, promo-wise, gear-wise especially, it was what I needed to figure out like what I need to do to be better, you know, where I had to suck before I realized what I need to do to be better, you know. So it was a good time, and surprisingly it was only a year. Like, it feels like way longer for me, you know. Like, not gonna lie, I stacked up some injuries while I was over there, but after I left there, I was off for 3 months, and then that's when I came to HIW, which was like early 2018, and that's when I met you, eh?
That was true. Yeah, I remember you showing up there and everything like that. Let's talk to the listeners a little bit about that experience too, because I mean, you and I both know what happened, but let's let them know about how you approached that, what you did from there, the continued training that you did with HIW at the time, and then we'll eventually start talking a little bit more about the PPW side.
Yeah, well, coming into HIW, I actually just showed up to a show, like, and I introduced myself to some of the guys at the start of the show. But then during the show, as you saw, I got called out by LS Asino, and then I found out later, like way later. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself, but give me 1 second. He knew who I was. Apparently, even though I was over in Regina, you know, the guy in crappy cargo shorts, people have heard of me. Good or bad, good or mostly bad, they've heard of me. So when I went to the show, El Assassino, of course, he's shooting his mouth off, telling people that, you know, they don't have what it takes to get in the ring. And there's just something, like, he was messing with me, all right? He was talking to me like I was a fan, you know, which I was on that night, but he called me into the ring. And he wanted to make an example out of me. And, like, little did I know he was doing that on purpose, because of the fact that, you know, he knew of me, and it's almost like he was testing me, right? But I got a job with HIW out of it. I impressed people enough where I got brought in. And it was kind of a similar situation to Ringside, where I was kind of really struggling to find an identity. I had no confidence when I first came in HIW, man. I really got into my own head about how maybe in Ringside, you know, I wasn't given much opportunity for a reason. And then with HIW, I kind of got lucky. Like I said, I got plucked out of the crowd, you know, and I was going to, you know, try to talk my way in there. But then I got dragged in the ring. So it was very unconventional, but I think it worked out for me in the end because I actually rose through the ranks there at HIW, which was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And there's just something really exciting about a whole locker room of guys I've never even met, let alone wrestled. So 1 year later, I ended up feuding with El Asesino again, and that completely changed everything for me. I don't know if I've even told you this, but 2019 was the best year of my career. Start of 2018, no confidence. Start of 2019, I got 2 matches in a row with El Asesino where I feel I really found my footing, and I just kind of changed people's mind.
Definitely so. And it really stood out, again, that opportunity with El Asesino. Getting to call those matches and getting to witness them was a great experience, and getting to see what you were bringing to the table and watching your progression from there was definitely excellent in that sense. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about actually working with El Asesino, what it was like being dragged into the ring by somebody who, as everybody knows, is one of the most vicious, vile individuals inside those ropes. Was there any fear in the back of your mind when you had to step in there with, a walking legend like El Asesino?
It was very nerve-wracking. Even just the way he talks, man. He's in your face. He's very, he's intimidating, we're about the same height, man, but it feels like he's towering over me when he talks to me. It was intense. If we trail back to the very first night, it was completely different from the way it was from, let's say, the very last time he and I fought. I feel like whether he means to or not, he brought out the best in me each time. Like I said, I had no confidence when he dragged me in the ring, but I hung in there with him to the point where I got brought into HIW. And he smacks the hell out of you, he'll slam the hell out of you, and he'll talk shit. It's unreal. On paper, that sounds like a horrible situation to be in, the kind of situation that you'd spend your whole life avoiding. But when I was in there, man, it's what I needed. So screw El Asesino, but I also want to thank him because I honestly think it's because of him. And the lickings he gave me, it's made me the wrestler that I am now, and made me believe that I could hang in HIW, and then from there, PPW, and being a top player. Exactly.
And we'll transition over to the PPW talk now too, because we know El Asesino's heavy hand in PPW is there as well too. Yeah. You two have had that match in Prairie Pro Wrestling at the Food Truck Wars and stuff like that. Let's talk about when you were first approached by Prairie Pro Wrestling to come on over to join it, what your thoughts were coming into a new company, what maybe fears you might have had, or excitement you had going into it. What was your game plan coming into Prairie Pro Wrestling?
With Prairie Pro Wrestling, man, it couldn't have come at a better time. Like I said, I was really finding my footing in 2019, and halfway through 2019, that's when this came up, and it was just perfect timing because I wasn't even nervous. I was incredibly excited. It was an entirely new platform with people that I know would give me every opportunity to succeed, and give everyone opportunities to succeed. We all know HIW had some problems, right? Some troubles here and there, and then everyone's hearing the rumor and innuendo that HIW is going under. And and then you hear conflicting reports that it's staying around, and then you hear Prairie Pro Wrestling. It was a hell of a time. Just all the questions of where we're gonna be able to work, who's all going where, where everyone's loyalty lies and stuff. It was insane, man. But the first chance I got, I talked to Prairie Pro Wrestling, and I told them I was more than happy to come in. But I don't think I talked to you about this either, but I was actually gonna stay with HIW. I was approached by the booker and the promoter, and they asked me if I was going to stay around because a lot of people were leaving left and right. Everyone was out the door, man, and they asked me if I was going to be one of them. But working in your hometown, it's almost a no-brainer, right? And then Prairie Pro Wrestling was actually very good to me, where they were going to let me work with HIW because they understand that, ring time is invaluable, man. You just need it. You need it, man. And then I had an opportunity to work for 2 promotions in my hometown. I can't turn that down.
No, it's a great opportunity, as anybody would know. The more exposure, the better. You get the better ring experience and stuff. And that's always been the thought with Prairie Pro Wrestling, right from the get-go, was that we wanted to give everybody an opportunity to be able to explore themselves, get that experience, whether it was with us or with somebody else, without shutting that door like so many have done before, kind of thing, and trying to make things be so exclusive and stuff. Open this whole new world for not only the fans but also for the workers as well too, and you yourself being along for that ride. Let's talk a little bit before we wind this up about some of your favorite matches you've had, whether it be in PPW or other companies. Maybe some of the guys you're looking forward most to getting in that squared circle with.
Well, like I said, El Asesino, man, as much as I hated getting chopped by that guy, to the point where I actually had like a single bead of blood go down my chest. You just get to that point, but I'm thankful for those matches. So I hate the guy, but I gotta have El Asesino on the list there. In ringside, I got to face this guy named Scott Justice, who's a huge name in Alberta. He's actually moved now. I believe he's back in Australia, but he was a guy. I was only like 2 months in when I worked with him, and he really pushed me too. Like, goddamn, he kicked my face in. He threw me around some, but like only the one time. So I think because of that, I'm able to look back like through rose-colored glasses, right? Where that isolated match taught me so much. And actually, with CWE, I can't believe I didn't even mention CWE. But the entire time I've been wrestling, I've been with CWE. I just want to throw that out there. Or CWE was just like come through Saskatoon here and there. But with that being said, every time CWE came through, they gave me some kind of like productive match to be in, right? Whether it's like working with someone who's very character driven, which helps me perform better, and then experienced people. Like, dude, I got to work with Juventud Guerrera less than a year ago, which was so much fun. And then Chase Owens, I worked with him less than a year after I debuted. So with people like that, Chase Owens, Juventud Guerrera, just want to single those guys out because they push me in a very different way, where it's like you have no choice but to keep up, where I wrestled Chase Owens in ratty cargo shorts, but he made me look good that night, he made me keep up, which I did, thankfully, but just I'm very lucky to have had the matches that I've had. Like I've only been it's been 4 years. I've been a pro wrestler for 4 years, and I'm just very lucky to have had the matches that I've had. So if I could just say El Asesino, Chase Owens, Juventud Guerrera, Scott Justice. Those are my all-time favorite matches.
Beautiful. And what about looking at some of the guys that are out there right now, or any of the potential opponents that you have coming up in Prairie Pro Wrestling, or even outside of Prairie Pro Wrestling, who are maybe your top 2 or 3 wrestlers out there that you currently look forward to on the independent scene having a matchup one-on-one with?
Man, Jack Pride is a guy that I just recently had a match with, and I just met him last summer. It was like exactly a year ago. I just met him last August, and before that, I knew about him for like a year and a half, and he was killing it in Alberta. He was like the longest rating Alberta champion and stuff. He's having banger matches with like MRB and stuff. And like, it's not that I was like looking him up. He was just always in my timeline of people sharing his stuff, people talking about him. It was unreal. Like, just who the hell is this guy? And he's freaking over with everybody. And then finally getting a match with him in that first round of the Prairie Pro Wrestling tournament, and the fact that I took him down, that is like just that alone. It's not the tournament final. It's a tournament first round match, but I hold that in high regard because of how talented Jack Pride is, and like with how close that match was. I really think that he and I could have better matches, and I'm not gonna lie, I think there is some resentment for me beating him. Like, I don't know if you saw, but he was chasing that damn referee after the match. Yeah. He had something to say.
He sure did.
Something to say to the ref, so I'm just waiting for him to say it to me, and we'll see what comes from that. But, on a positive note, he's a very talented dude, and, I just think he and I could do some good stuff.
And it was a great match, and anybody who's tuning in right now, that match will soon be available through the Prairie Pro Wrestling YouTube channel, so if you want to check that out, from 4 rounds to the crown, that will be involved with episode 6 of PPW's Revolution, featuring Tony Novak and Jack Pride in one of the very most competitive matches in the first round of the 4 rounds to the crown championship tournament. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything you want to talk to the fans about before we wrap up here?
Man, like, the one thing that's been on my mind for months, and I'm sure with everybody else, I just can't wait for Prairie Pro Wrestling to have shows again. Because it's not even just wrestling as a whole. It's Prairie Pro Wrestling, specifically the community, man. The freaking, like, rock star show aspect of it. Of just, it's insanely interactive. I miss it. I can't tell you how much I miss it. And even just talking to you, man, the nostalgia. As crazy as it sounds, man, like PPW isn't gone, but it's just been on hiatus, and that alone is just eating at me, man. I miss everybody, So with that being said, I miss you, Robert. God damn, it's so good to see you, and I can't wait for shows to come back.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. I want to thank you again for your time, being here today, giving us this interview and everything like that. Looking forward to the next round of 4 rounds to the crown, and I wish you the best of luck in the 4 rounds to the crown tournament. I think you got everything it takes to go all the way. So thank you very much for taking the time, and thank you everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show here today, and make sure to like and subscribe. As always, tune in to Ring Respect Radio. Have a great day.
Are you tired of the same old pro wrestling? Then check out the amazing action on Powerslam.tv, the biggest indie pro wrestling channel in the world. Get over 3,000 hours of the best pro wrestling events from over 100 of the biggest names in the industry from over 15 countries around the globe. Get your free trial today at Powerslam.tv.
Okay, we're back, and what a great interview that was. You know what, Papa Smokes, Tony Novak, what a great talent, what a great hardworking young man. I was very grateful to be able to sit down with him and learn more about his career as well, too. And, I see a lot of great things for him if he continues his hard work and determination with Prairie Pro Wrestling and every other company that's been booking and working with him so far.
Yeah, you nailed it right on the head there, Munson, when you said hard work and determined. That's really what stands out with Tony Novak to me is the kid's young. He's got his head screwed on straight. He's got a healthy respect for the traditions in the past of wrestling, and he is such a hard worker. He's very determined to be the best wrestler he can be. I've seen some of this guy's work at the Prairie Wrestling Training Academy. He tirelessly trains, and that's the kind of hard work that's going to get a guy ahead in this business. All cheers out to Rocket Shoes Novak.
Definitely so. So I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. And now we're going to take it down to a little bit of a more personal touch here on Ring Respect Radio, something we haven't done quite as much. But, we sit around before we record these shows sometimes having a few brewskis, a few shots of whiskey, and just talking over, our past history with professional wrestling before we were even involved with the industry itself, what kind of brought us to it as kids and stuff, Papa Smoke. So I thought for fun, again, we would come into this segment and talk a little bit more about our own stories and how it came to be. I'll get started with my childhood portion, get you to talk about your childhood portion, then we'll get into the whole where it kind of brought us together here today kind of thing with what we're doing. So we'll go back. I was actually originally born in Calgary, Alberta, but moved out to Saskatchewan before the age of 2, where I grew up. And I think my earliest recollection of professional wrestling was sitting around with my brother on a Saturday and, flipping through the channels once you got past all the early morning Saturday cartoons and stuff like that. And I remember flipping to a channel and it was WWF Superstars at the time, or Wrestling Challenge, whichever it was called at the time in our area and stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Earthquake was the first guy I saw out there crushing, a jobber opponent at the time. And right away, I just thought, what is this larger than life show that I'm seeing right here? I wasn't familiar with, and I was just glued to it instantly. I mean, I would go with my brother. We would walk down to the local video store, once every week, and we would dig through their bin of old tapes that they were trying to sell. So we would be buying, old wrestling tapes for, couple bucks and stuff like that from the video store. We would rent everything that we could ever find that was wrestling based, from WWF to WCW. Again, we were very limited in what was available through television and through the video store at the time. They didn't have a whole lot of the NWA material or anything like that, or anything kind of, pre WWF. So, I mean, just as well as I do that I was kind of exposed more to the WWF side of things as an early child. As I've grown, that's definitely changed. I've gone back to experience a lot of great wrestling and everything there. And I remember telling you a story recently, Papa Smokes, that we thought we would share on the show that was kind of fun, because my brother and I, we loved to collect wrestling action figures as a kid. And I remember one night at our school, we used to do these in January. They were these fun night things that we do. And when you got a little bit older, you ended up being the one that will work some of the events events, the kind of thing. You were behind the scenes helping out and everything. And I remember them having one of these kids fish pond things where, you know, you pay your little token, you come in with a little fishing rod that you dump over top of this wall, and somebody on the other side clips a prize to the end of it. Person pulls it up, you know, you win a prize every single time. And I happen to be working the fun night thing this on the fish pond that night. And I remember my brother was standing in line waiting to take his turn. And there, sitting in the pile of prizes, was a Keem the African Dream action figure. And I thought, isn't this absolutely perfect? We can just add this to our collection at no charge at all. My brother throws his line over, and of course, I put it on there. Excitement on his face because he's just won the WWF Akeem action figure and everything like that. You know, so all's well. The Munson brothers rigged one up for ourselves and got ourselves a brand new WWF action figure at the time. It was a great moment, fun time, and everything like that.
Nice one, Munson. We should call you the brain, maybe.
Yeah, maybe so. And then, sorry, from there, I went to a lot of events as a kid. I remember being there, seeing some of these guys. I was there when Bret Hart won his first championship in Saskatoon from Ric Flair. I mean, that was a magical moment I remember as a kid. I know I've told you many times, and I think I've mentioned it on here, about a lot of the guys would stay at the Travelodge Hotel in Saskatoon when they would do shows. So they were usually here for a couple days, you know, between the show before and after, before these things, because they weren't doing house shows every single night like they do nowadays. So you would get the opportunity to go in there and meet them, the ones that would want to meet you anyway. There was still a lot of kayfabe being played. So I remember guys like Earthquake would kind of yell at kids and tell them to piss off and stuff if they were looking for an autograph. But I mean, he's supposed to be a heel character, so he's playing right into that. But I remember, you know, getting to meet guys like the Bushwhackers and, you know, the British Bulldog, you know, Bret and Owen Hart. I mean, it was fantastic. I got to meet like The Undertaker, Mr. Perfect, a lot of these really great names of professional wrestling back in the day. And then there was my infamous sit down with Luna Vachon, who was just an absolute sweetheart to meet. Got to sit there for, you know, well over an hour having a bite to eat and just talking to her about everything to do with professional wrestling. And talk about somebody who not only was no longer playing that heel role that she was meant to be playing, but she really let the cat out of the bag on a lot of things that were behind the scenes and kind of opened my eyes to professional wrestling in a whole different way on that point. So, you know, I grew up from there, got into high school. I did actually wrestle for my high school wrestling team for a few years and stuff like that. Nobody out there listening get too excited. My record was maybe about 3 wins and 300 losses. I was fucking terrible at it. So that keeping in mind kind of maybe put me off of ever taking it that much further than what I ever did. From there, I just, you know, I got into my adulthood, and a lot of things just kind of happened on a personal level and stuff like that I'm not going to get too deep into. Kind of, it didn't make me not a wrestling fan. It just took me away from the path of going too much further with my wrestling fandom and stuff like that. So that was about where it stopped for a little while. I still watched on TV a bit and kept up. I mean, maybe I was turned off too because I couldn't stand too much of the Attitude Era. I mean, it kind of grated on me after a while, put me off of it for a bit, but I would eventually get back into it, and I think we're going to lead to that right away. So I'm going to flip that over to you, Papa Smokes. Let the people know about how your story started, and we'll get back to where we both got back into this thing.
No, for sure. That was an interesting story. I love people's childhood stories about how they got into wrestling, and I like your wrestling figure story. I find that stuff awesome. But yeah, same thing for me. Kind of. I'm from Manitoba, and we got there was no WWF wrestling on TV at that point because it was all out of New York, but. What we got on TV was called Pacific Northwest Wrestling. It was out of Vancouver, and it was run by promoter Al Tomko, who I'm not sure if he was an actual member of the NWA but his wrestling was NWA based. That's where he got his talent from. And I saw some famous old stars, including Butch and Luke, the Sheep Herders, and Honky Tonk Wayne Ferris and Dr. D. David Schultz and a few guys like that from the old days out there. And then I have older brothers, so they were buying professional wrestling magazines such as Inside Wrestling and The Wrestler were the main ones. We got the Bill Apter mags, as everybody knows, and yeah, we used to follow the world of the WWF and the rest of the NWA, all the southern stuff, and Texas and Portland and all that kind of stuff through the magazines, which was months behind and such, but we followed the exploits of Bruno Sammartino and Gene Kiniski and the upcoming Ric Flair and Rick Steamboat and some of those guys when they were first starting back in the magazines. So that kind of gave us a rounder view of the whole North American wrestling world. Then we started getting the TV for Vern Gagne's AWA in the early 80s. And we started watching that, and that, of course, was one of the main top federations, including WWF and NWA, was the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, with champion Nick Bockwinkel and such a cast of great stars, most of whom ended up having a run in the 80s. WWF at some point, as Vince offered them all more money, and they jumped ship to come there. But yeah, I always feel like I was so lucky as a small child. It wasn't independent wrestling I grew up on, but it was the good stuff, and we were seeing it live every single month too in the old Winnipeg Arena, which is torn down now. But I remember those days. My dad wasn't a huge fan, but what would get me tickets and take me, and sometimes my brother and his friends took me, and we just had a great old time at the matches. They're watching, you know, young Hulk Hogan, young Shawn Michaels, Jesse Ventura, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, Baron Von Raschke, so many guys that went on to bigger heights after that too. And I just feel I just feel so nostalgic for those times of seeing the younger Bobby Heenan, like, just working on his manager's gimmick, and how the audience hated him so much and would just chant "Weasel, Weasel, Weasel." And this was just captivating to a small child, of course, and a teenager eventually as I was going. And then we were getting WWF programming on TV, just like you mentioned, WWF Superstars on in Saturday mornings, but then there was Maple Leaf Wrestling, which was WWE Toronto, basically, and we got that on TV too, and that was kind of fun, but you could see that the game was changing even by then. Even by the early 80s, you could see that they were just, you know, from a booking perspective, really kind of just trying to build brands and build superstars rather than have compelling matches and compelling angles and storylines, and, you know, using a lot of gimmickry and wrestlers coming out with animals and wild outfits and all kinds of stuff. And it started to feel soury to me even when I was a kid then, but I kept up watching. And then I had a period also similar to what you described in the 90s, where I was like, okay, I'm done with this shit. Like, I can't do this anymore. Attitude Era and such like that. It started getting just so absolutely unbelievable, so hokey, just using talents that I didn't think really deserved to be there, etc., etc. So I had a good 8 or 10 years where I just had basically turned my back on most wrestling. I still went to some independent shows here and there, but I was just not going to watch on TV anymore. I was not going to pay money to go see pay-per-views in bars, you know, back in those days, which is what you had to do. So I had other interests in combat sports and other kinds of sports, so I just kind of focused in on that for a while, and then I got back into my 30s, I guess. I started to... I think I just missed it, really, and I thought I got to go about this in a different way. And that's when I really started getting connected with independent wrestling again, with whatever local show would be going on in the city you lived in, and just see what they have going on. There's always some great wrestlers and some that aren't so great, but that's kind of what makes the balance of a good promotion. And yeah, that's basically kind of how I've come back to it now. I don't really care to watch the big companies on TV anymore, but I'd rather pick a smaller company that has a bit more color and a bit more character and is struggling and is trying to do good and is trying to make it big and putting passion and energy into it. And that's kind of where I'm at now. So, yeah, I will watch NWA. I will watch MLW and shows like that scout their talent from within and don't just trade for other wrestlers that have been on TV with whatever level of success and such. I like to see the development of new wrestlers in smaller promotions. So it's kind of where my fandom is at right now.
And great place for it to be. I mean, you mentioned NWA and MLW, both fantastic shows that if our listeners don't currently watch either one of those shows or haven't given much attention to them, change your frame of mind and start supporting those two companies, because the material they're producing is absolutely amazing. And here's the catch: like we've talked about this before, Papa Smokes. It's a lot of the guys that keep coming out onto, like say AEW, for example, and people get all excited about them. Well, these are guys we've been seeing work in the NWA and MLW prior to this kind of thing. I mean, we're very familiar with their work, and everybody acts as if this is some brand new talent that they've never seen before because they've never taken that opportunity to go check them out.
Yeah, and people are saying, who's this new guy, Eddie Kingston and stuff, and you just have to kind of chuckle thinking, yeah, I guess he is new to most people that watch wrestling, but it's a 20-year vet right there. The guy knows what's going on, but he's got a big chance. He's on TV making some real money, and I wish him all the best.
Yeah, I think the same. I just heard that Thunder Rosa heading that way as well too, and I mean, one of NWA's great talents right there.
Yeah, and good for her too. I really hope NWA is going to be okay. It sort of sucks that some of the smaller companies that have been being conscientious about not having crowds and not performing during COVID, they're the ones that are being hurt in a financial standpoint and talent-wise too. They're losing some of their talent, which really sucks. But no, I wish them all the best. I'll continue to support their stuff as long as it's on.
Very much so. And you know what? I know a whole plethora of talent out in Western Canada that would love to work for the NWA or MLW. So if their rosters are getting thin, I'm pretty sure they can head out our way and pick up some many great talents to add to their shows.
Yeah, they should think about that. We've got a few they'd be interested in for sure.
Definitely so. So now we want to get to the part where we talk about kind of how we did get back into it and what led us to where we are here today, Papa Smokes. And I'll start it off with saying that the whole ring respect thing came about. It was a slow process. I remember being online one day and seeing an advertisement for a company out of the United Kingdom that was called Cultured Vultures. This is a kind of a pop culture media publication that's online, and they were looking for people to do write-ups about professional wrestling. I wasn't quite sure what they were looking for. It ended up being that it was very centered around like the current product, especially WWE and stuff like that. They were looking for, definitely looking for what would drive the immediate attention to the website and stuff like that. But they did at one point give me a chance to write a feature which was about my time at day camp training or whatever and everything like that. So that was a neat experience. So I did write for them for a little while, and while I was doing it, I started thinking to myself, like, I feel like I have more of a voice when it comes to professional wrestling than just, writing previews for the upcoming nobody's going to watch it WWE pay-per-view and stuff like that. And I started to think, there's a lot of podcasts out there right now, and a lot of these guys, I kept listening to them, and it was every single time they'd watch a pay-per-view is bitch about this, online, bitch about this, bitch about that, constantly complaining about the product that they were hate watching, in my opinion, and stuff like that. And you know what? I understand the frustrations that are out there and stuff like that sometimes. So I thought maybe I'll try to be a bit of a character and stuff like that. Maybe I'll be the positive guy. I'm going to start a podcast as this positive guy that talks nothing but positivity about these kind of things. And so I went forth. I originally called the show Rob's Rock and Wrestling there for a while and started running it that way. I mean, the viewership was not good by any means or anything, but it got my foot in the door, which was nice. And it also led me to my next step, which was I met a couple of young wrestlers that were working for local promotion, High Impact Wrestling, HIW at the time. They ended up talking to me for a little bit, and they're the ones who ended up putting me in contact with our good friend Roberto. We'll leave it as Roberto. We're not going to go say who he is any further than that, but we got in contact with Roberto, and I started coming in to write articles about High Impact Wrestling. I would do a little bit of the reviews of the shows that they brought me into. From there, I got to meet Dice Steele, who was a part of those shows as well too, and then I went and did, like I said, I did the day camp with them. I wanted to be able to say if I'm going to write about these guys or talk about these guys, I want to be able to at least step in there once, know what it's like to feel like to be bumped onto those aprons and stuff like that, just so I can say, hey, look, I put forth that much to show that I'm committed to this industry and everything. So I went forth and did that portion of it. And I think maybe that's when it kind of opened the doors a little bit more. They realized that I wasn't just some guy coming to write a couple of things. I wasn't just another fan in the crowd. And that's when we started talking about doing HIW Wildside Wrestling as a TV show or a YouTube show. And that became a meeting between myself, Roberto, and Dice for quite some time that they would then have to go try to pitch back to the promoter, King Cash. There was a lot of back and forth before we decided that we were going to go ahead and do this. And we did an initial taping of one of the shows. We filmed the whole thing. I got it edited up. And I remember sitting down at Bar Tari there and watching this thing, both with Roberto and Dice, and absolutely watching them in amazement of how well the different camera angles switched over and stuff like that, and not missing certain pieces and everything like that. My timing on it was pretty decent. And I mean, I was pretty pumped to hear from guys who were in the industry this long that, I had done a good job that pleased them on this. And so there was talk about doing commentary at this point for the show and putting it on YouTube. And originally, the idea was I was going to be doing commentary alongside of Doyle Benson, who we're both very familiar with, one of the great supporters of Prairie Pro Wrestling. He also works for Wendell Clark's Bar and Grill, who's also a sponsor of Prairie Pro Wrestling as well too. So I remember Doyle and I sat down at a bar one night to try to run commentary back with the that old equipment that I had there that we were using off the hop there. Yeah. So we're trying to do this in a bar in a very loud setting. And I remember getting home and start to put this thing together, editing it. And a lot of the vocals were really, really dimmed out. It was really hard to hear. It was very, very poor quality at the time. And that was due to the equipment, and B, doing this in a bar setting, which is really not the best place for recording audio ever. So from there, we were going to go forth and continue to try to do this. Unfortunately, Doyle, a very busy man, especially working in the bar scene and stuff like that, working with bars and restaurants, a lot of the time busy when I wasn't able to make it and vice versa. So our schedules were quite the clash. And so I remember being at one of the shows, I believe it was in February at an HIW show, and Roberto comes up to me and says to me, I think I've got the right guy for the color commentary on the show. I said, oh, perfect. He goes, yeah, he's a good long time friend of mine. Said really knows his stuff, knows professional wrestling a lot, and he gave me your number, and I got in contact with you. And I remember that was that battle royal that we did for HIW Wildside to determine who was going to go and wrestle Cody Rhodes at Battle Arts that year. And I remember coming over to your place to record Papa Smokes, and that was kind of where HIW Wildside TV and our time as commentary started. And I mean, it's come a long way since then, but very, very unique story. But let's we'll go from there. Why don't you talk a little bit about your way back into it, and then we'll go back to talking about Prairie Pro Wrestling to finish up.
Yeah, we'll end up back in the same place again. Anyway, it was similar for me too. I had, like I said, I kind of got reinterested in wrestling on an independent and local level. So back in the early 2000s, I had gone to a few shows when the local promotion was called POW. I think Crash Crimson and some of those guys, and Principal Pound, rest in peace, will remember those times. But then once it became HIW, I started going to some more shows. It was a very thriving promotion when I first started going. Then it kind of went through some dismal days of fans just weren't coming. The shows were quiet, and so I wanted to help. I brought some friends. I brought lots of first timers that had never been to a live wrestling show before, and I don't know if that helped it, but just some more noise and making the fans can help to make a show fun, as we've seen in COVID days. The lack of them really hurt some of these shows. So there can be any participation and activity of a loud nature going on by the crowd, then it just makes the show. It's better for the performers. It's better for the fans. It's just better for everybody, and they started getting good again. And anyway, I ended up meeting a few of the wrestlers and a couple of guys associated with the Wrestling Federation there. Same thing, we were also in Bartari a few times, which is a sponsor of PPW. It's such an excellent bar and restaurant. I really like it. But we watched a couple pay-per-views there. There was some kind of mock commentary going on by a few of us in the background. There was talk of old classic wrestling and some spots that reminded us of certain stuff in the past. And I guess that must have caught some attention amongst the boys. And eventually before I knew you, I knew that this person, Robert Munson, was doing some articles online, and I thought, yeah, that's a good thing. And somebody's trying. Let's get some stuff going and get the fandom going in HIW again here. And I think that helped. And then the filming started and all that. And I thought, good. Now if we have these matches up somewhere, people can watch them, and it'll just help to grow the viewership and such. And then then it came around that I got offered the commentary position, and then I realized it was with you. Then I met you. Yeah, that first meeting was still when we first established Studio Smokes, I guess, here as the recording venue, and you came over with your stuff, and it was all pretty basic recording equipment at the beginning, and you and I didn't really know what we were doing right off the bat, but we just had some enthusiasm and some determination. We hopped in and started doing that commentary. God, it was making me so anxious and nervous for the first few times we did it, and it's something you got to work through, right? It's not as easy as people think it is, and I also think doing the podcasts, doing the Ring Respect podcasts, I always saw it as good, interesting stuff to talk about, but also practice, just being on a microphone and talking to listeners that are going to be listening to it later, and just being able to compose your thoughts and get your sentences out in a good manner so that everybody can understand. And the rest is history, really. But I started out thinking having me as a commentator is such a weird idea. I know lots of stuff about the wrestling industry, but I've never really considered myself a talker. But like I say, just doing commentary and doing these podcasts has just really helped me a lot to just to get my nerves under control and to get my head straight and to get my thoughts coming clearer. And I love it. I don't feel the anxiety or the nervousness very much anymore. And I've loved all this time. You and I have developed chemistry, and we have a good thing going on now. And we basically have figured out each other's speech patterns and such like that. That the little things you need to do to have a successful commentary and podcast kind of repartee. So yeah, here we are now in 2020 working for PPW. We put our time in the trenches, and now we've got our own project that we're both invested in and committed to, and man, it makes it all the better.
And let's we'll talk a little bit about PPW as well too here to finish things up. But before that, I just kind of mentioned to people that once we kind of started doing the commentary there, it was really just a go 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 sort of thing. The outline that we were basically given was that you were going to be a heel commentator, I was a babyface commentator, keeping up with the persona I was trying to portray currently with Ring Respect, and I had changed the name of the show over to Ring Respect at the time. And it wasn't in the format that people are going to be used to, like listening today or over the last several months that we've been changing formats here. I used to do more like reviews and previews of WWE events that I was used to with my articles. It was kind of try to help boost the articles. And then I kind of, I went a little bit more in depth. I started writing for Pro Wrestling Post for a while there and getting more into the Australian, New Zealand scene and also with Germany scene as well too. So it kind of it opened me up a little bit more, helped me with my knowledge a little bit as well too. And then also listening to the stories that you would tell. I think that's what really sparked me into thinking that this show needed to be more, like an hour to an hour and a half type podcast like show where we can basically bounce ideas off each other, talking about the past right up to modern times and just giving some real, human thought on the subjects and stuff from a couple of guys who now, I mean, what has it been? It's been probably a few years at this point, Papa Smokes, that we've been doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it seems weird, but it has been a couple of years now, and I like the format of the Ring Respect podcast now. This latest one we've been doing for a while. We've gone through a couple as we've just experimented with what kind of sounds we liked. I also like the ones where we used to just call old classic matches on YouTube. Those are still up there. Those are pretty good ones too. Just picking a match of some interesting wrestlers from the past and just calling it kind of through the lens of today sort of thing. And I liked those ones too, but I think we got a good thing going on now. Now we got it on Backbreaker Media, and we can get our voices out to a few more sets of ears, and I just think things are going smoothly and all the way up right now.
And just as always, we're always looking for opportunities to grow and push ourselves even further. And that's what I know I've always been about that. I've always wanted to, I'm never content with things the way they are. I always feel like we can always strive to do better, and everybody can always strive to do better. And I look for those opportunities, and that's, it's what I did. I came into HIW when I did and everything like that. Again, you get into the wrestling industry in that sense and stuff like that, Papa Smokes, and not everybody was all on board with having me there filming or being a part of that kind of thing because they didn't know me personally, and rightfully so. They didn't really owe me anything at the time, so it wasn't like they needed to, be kind to me and accept me in with, loving arms or anything like that. But there was definitely some names in the industry that surprised the hell out of me that were very welcoming, very great people that taught me a lot of things along the way and stuff like that. I mean, again, I owe a lot of my start to Roberto and Dice for what they got me into, but even getting to work with talents like I'm gonna mention him right now, Michael Richard Blaze, who on more than one occasion would sit down and talk to me about his particular match, some of the things that were going to happen, things to watch for and stuff like that, which got me keeping an eye open for certain points in a match and stuff like that, knowing where to be, where to get those cameras, and coming up with some great things to say. He was always an open door, and it continues to be an open door. Anytime that I've wanted to contact him about anything, he's always been willing to talk to me more about professional wrestling and give me as much information as he can and stuff like that. And I'm not saying he's the only one. It's just a name that has been in the industry a long time that immediately comes to mind that's kind of always helped me out anytime I've needed it there.
Yeah, I've that's awesome. Really, I can tell that you and Blaze have a good little thing going on. He's been very nice to me too in our brief interactions. I would shout out Mitch Clark and Phil Deadly and Tony Novak as being some of the wrestlers that were immediately quite nice to me backstage and quite welcoming, and it always makes it a lot easier when you're the new face there if there's a couple of people that just don't care about shyness or anything like that. They just come up and say hi and have a chat with you, and it makes you feel so much welcome. And yeah, it's just been a dream working for this company. We've never had any major problems of any kind, and yeah, it's left us open to be creative and work on our craft and try and get better and better at commentary and do our podcast in the meantime. And we have the freedom to do that. I couldn't be happier about any of that.
For sure. But, I'd be amiss, Papa Smokes, if we didn't sit down and maybe talk a little bit about how Prairie Pro Wrestling came about. So we're going to actually break a little bit of the wall down right now, because I'm going to let people in behind the scenes, maybe to stuff that they didn't know. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but give them a little bit more than they knew from before anyway. So, we were working in HIW there, and I know like that you and I had discussions before about like, some of the turmoil that was going on there and stuff like that. I was trying my best to stay out of it and ignore it, but it is very difficult when you're right in the midst of this thing. And, the expectation becomes, you need to come here, film our show, break it up into all these different episodes, edit it, break it down, go and do commentary and stuff like that. And I mean, it's exhausting work. I enjoy doing it, but it's exhausting work. And I know I eventually do have a tipping point. I think my tipping point was when the expectation became much more. It was not just you're doing a great job for us and we really appreciate it. It became, how much more can we get out of you? And it became very frustrating for me. I started to really it started to break me down mentally, because it didn't make me as excited to be there and do what I was doing, which felt really bad for me, because I really enjoyed the crew and everybody that was working inside the ring, and I wanted to do this for them. But, at a certain point, a human being's got a breaking point and everything like that, where they just, to hell with it kind of thing. And it started to feel like that. And I had heard this for quite a while in the background, that there was always rumors that there was plans to possibly start another professional wrestling company here in Saskatoon, and that this was going to be done by some of the crew that was currently working for HIW. Now, at one point, I knew that this was going to eventually happen, so I was trying to bide my time and look for an opportunity to be a part of this new company when it did come about. So my friendship with Roberto continued, and he did start to mention about what was going on. He opened Prairie Pro Wrestling Academy, first and foremost, which was going to be training and still working shows with HIW and stuff like that. But inevitably, the big plan was Roberto wanted to open his own promotion, and rightfully so. And that's when I think discussions with you and I started to happen, where it was like, well, what would it take in order for us to get this to happen sooner and stuff like that. And, you and I have been busting ass working our entire lives and stuff like that. And both of us kind of said the same thing. Like, we've got some extra money kicking around that we could probably help do some investments, buy some equipment, help with the ring and stuff like that. And the two of us took the opportunity to include ourselves investing into Prairie Pro Wrestling to help get it off the ground and make sure that we could be a part of this company from the ground level. And the neatest part about that for me, Papa Smokes, was not so much the investing part, was the being accepted as someone whose opinion mattered now, finally. Like, when we sat down with those meetings and we were talking plans for food truck wars and what we needed to do, and then when we sit down for meetings to discuss, storylines and what was going to be planned out. Like, I remember those first meetings talking about what was planned for, between some of our main stars and stuff like that right off the hop. And we got to give that input as if we were, somebody whose opinion mattered in this industry finally.
Yeah, that was definitely a big plus to that whole time too. I'm also not going to go into detail about the dissolving of HIW or anything, except to say that when you were talking about being at your mental breaking point, I very well remember the 17-minute promo you cut about your feelings at that time, and that was of great amusement to me, but I understood it also. But anyway, it started to become an idea in a couple people's minds about maybe starting an alternative fed up here in Saskatoon and running it out of Saskatoon instead of Regina. And I was in on some of those talks. You and I were in on some of those talks at the ground level, and what a wild, exciting time that was. We had of course, a year where we had to kind of sit on it and not say too much out and about just for business reasons. And we managed to scrape some money together and get some stuff going. And we had enthusiasm from some of the locally based wrestlers, which, of course, they were in a weird state of mind because the promotion that they had always worked for was going out of business. And so there was some enthusiasm to get on board with the new ones. We never had to really look too far for talent, including our great friends from Alberta, which we trade and use quite often, including Michael Richard Blaze and Sheik Akbar Shabazz, Zoe Sager, Mitch Clark, etc., a bunch of great talent we have coming from out there. And then, it was just a matter of a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of dreams hopefully becoming reality, and a lot of money spent and a lot of hours doing some hard work. And it's good that we got our start when we did, because then we kind of could hit the ground running when PPW started. We weren't the fledgling brand new commentators stumbling over our spots anymore. We kind of had at least a rudimentary understanding of how it works, and we had some chemistry as a pair going on the air together. And you of course had polished up your editing skills and your skills with YouTube and such like that. And then it was just a matter of using that nice brand new ring and getting some shows. And of course the fans, after that better part of a year with no local shows, were just foaming at the mouth for some live indie wrestling action. So it's just never been a problem with PPW. We have a good venue. We always filled it plus. Some people think we should get a new, bigger venue. Some people like myself aren't sure about that, because I like the ambiance of everybody jammed in there and making a lot of noise. Now with COVID, of course, that becomes maybe a point that we should think about again, of getting a bigger one, and so we can seat some people within proper social distancing. I don't know. This is all stuff we'll talk about behind closed doors eventually. But hasn't it been a wild ride with TPW and being there on the ground floor when that started, Munson?
Oh, for sure. And I know you mentioned about the editing and stuff like that. And anybody who's checked out Prairie Pro Wrestling Revolution, I mean, there's been a few mechanical problems that we've had with a little bit of the equipment during the recording process that I've tried to fix up best I could. Unfortunately, some things happen, Papa Smokes, and you got to make do with what you got. But I'm just going to give a little bit of a verbal sneak preview for anybody listening, that if you think that you've seen it all from me, well, guess what? I'm working on the material from 4 Rounds to the Crown right now, and she is looking beautiful. Probably some of the nicest, cleanest looking editing that I have done in quite some time. I've really been taking my time just fine tuning it and everything like that. So those cameras that were giving problems, I don't think are going to be an issue with the 2 episodes coming with the 4 Rounds to the Crown championship material stuff. I think I've got this one nailed down, Papa Smokes. I'm pretty excited about the release of the next 2 episodes of Prairie Pro Wrestling Revolution.
Well, okay, good. We wouldn't want anybody complaining about that or anything, but we are doing our best here, and those cameras we have would go from tape and then to video, so it's not always a perfect transition or anything like that. We're doing our best with what we got here, and I think that unsanctioned street fight of Creed versus Clark was just looking real good. Those camera guys got some fantastic shots during that match, and that's also been a new fun thing for PPW too, is in the video bros, Papa Smokes and Bobby Munson doing the filming too, and working as a team in that too. I think it strengthens our bond for commentary and for knowing the product really good, and that's been a wild ride too, and just loving watching the stuff on YouTube.
Very much so. And, if you're checking out the Prairie Pro Wrestling YouTube channel, we just released a video of Tony Novak, who dropped a bit of a promo video. Just as an alert, there is a little bit of a spoiler in that one for anyone who wasn't present at 4 Rounds to the Crown. So if you haven't watched the 4 Rounds to the Crown material yet, or you don't know about the winners, do not check out Tony Novak's video just yet. But if you have, then definitely check it out. If not, you can also wait, and I will be including it with the second episode of the 4 Rounds to the Crown or something along the lines there. It'll be on a future episode of Prairie Pro Wrestling Revolution, included with the actual show as well too. So that was a great little bonus that Tony Novak gave to everybody to try to help boost morale and everything as well during these COVID times and not being able to have live wrestling here in Saskatoon. It's been a real shame. I mean, personally, on a personal note, Papa Smokes, I miss the fans. I miss the workers. I miss just the ambiance and the atmosphere of being at a live show. And it feels like, despite everything going on, that we're still quite a ways away from this going forth again.
Yeah, and I agree with you on all those counts, but isn't it funny, the timing of it too? Like, I'm glad that we got PPW started in the food truck wars of a couple summers ago, and then got some shows in at our venue, the Cosmo Hall, but just we were making such momentum. We were getting all sellouts. Everything was good. The internet traffic was getting wild. Everybody talking in this area about PPW. Then we got our belt and set up this 4 Rounds to the Crown round robin tournament to crown our first champion, and then we get the first night of the matches done, and that's been it. So we haven't awarded our beautiful shiny new belt to anybody yet. We haven't had a winner in the tournament. We only had the first round. I'm glad that we got our federation off to a start before this happened, but it's never going to seem like good timing, especially when it happened this time, when we wanted to start that tournament to crown a new champion and just couldn't go on with it.
Well, I'm sure it's only going to make everybody more eager and more excited for the return of Prairie Pro Wrestling, not just us, but the fans as well. The entire PPW Nation is going to be jam-packed into wherever it is that we hold that next show whenever we finally can, as they continue to watch to find out who will be crowned the first ever Prairie Pro Wrestling champion. And a lot of great names, a lot of great Western Canadian names still belonging to that particular tournament, Papa Smokes. So it's going to be an exciting time. Before we close out here, I just wanted to know if there's any last things you want to bring up with the fans listening today.
No, it's been a good talk already. We've had a nice long podcast here. Why don't you wrap it up for us, Munson?
Definitely so. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I wanted to again thank you all our friends at Backbreaker Media in Alberta. Mike the Ref for this fantastic opportunity to be part of their program as well, and also continue to allow us to put the material on our own program for the Video Bros Network as well too, without any conflicts or anything like that. It's just another great way of branching out and reaching out to more people out there as well. So not only check out our show, but check out all the shows available through Backbreaker Media and all the work that Mike the Ref does. I mean, I'm gonna a little applause right there for that man, because he puts in a hell of a lot of work into this industry and deserves it right there. So thank you again, Mike. Thank you, Backbreaker Media. For all of you listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell so you know anytime that Papa Smokes and I release material right here on the Video Bros Network. Once again, we thank you for tuning in and continue to support professional wrestling, and in particular Western Canadian professional wrestling. Thank you and have a great day.